Several old sulfur mines are located along the riverside, and some reports have been connected to this particular mineral.
Kom over Hessdalen, så fikk vi se lys på den andre siden til dalen, og vi så hele lia, hele Hessdalen nedover, og da var det se nede, så vi kunne telle bjørkene på hele lia på Hessdalen. Og så plutselig kom det så fæl lukt. Det var rett svovel. Da var det opplyst i flere farver, begge sider av veien. All snøen var opplyst.
I 2004 så tok vi flere bilder etter hverandre på natta, hvor da høyesterettsfenomenet dukket opp over den posisjonen her hvor svovelgruva er lokalisert. Det var flere av disse som da var akkurat på samme sted, men startet da flere minutter etter hverandre. Så den gruva her, den er spesiell.
At Mr. Dennis' request, we've agreed not to use her real name, but we will call the nurse Judy. Sensitive and deeply religious. What she saw in the examining room July 8th, 1947, took Judy to the brink of hysteria.
And she said, I can't believe what I've just seen. She said, this was the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my life. She was going into this examination room that was across the hall. She was going in to get some supplies, and when she walked in the door, there was two doctors there, and she noticed a horrible smell immediately. But she saw these two doctors, and they said, we need you. She started out the door and said, you stay here, we've got to have you. And what it was, they were examining, she told me, 3 bodies, foreign bodies. She said 2 of them were very mutilated.
According to Mr. Dennis, Judy and both doctors became ill from the stench of the bodies as they continued to examine them. Judy was still not well the following day when Glenn met her for lunch at the Officers' Club. But he was more disturbed by her emotional state.
I knew she was almost in a state of shock because she said it was so gruesome and so horrible, and she would just, almost grab her head and it looked like she was just going into total shock.
What were they like? What do they look? I was asking what I asked Roz. What do they look like to you?
They were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, a sort of tan grey colour, very big eyes. They looked like undeveloped children in that their bodies were very sort of skinny, and they moved quite sort of rigidly. They shuffled rather than sort of walked. And I did notice a peculiar smell, like a sort of rotting vegetation smell.
John's nodding away here. This is
every one of these details I've heard in many, many cases. You see, each person brings out many subtle details that simply are not in the media, and that's what gives this thing its robust quality. And much of this remembered without hypnosis. You feel, well, hypnosis isn't accurate, or something like that. But much of the texture of this comes out just from recall like this.
So we seem to be, according to you then, what we're hearing is a common description of another species of life, which is about 3.5 feet high.
That's the most common
grey
one.
And waddles with big eyes.
Well,
really, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and then these complex, detailed things, which do vary to some degree, but there is this kind of robust texture of the experience, which is simply deepens and becomes more elaborate, and details keep coming that simply are not in the media.
I felt myself sort of being lifted up, being pulled upwards. And I was in this light, lots of blue-white light. And then the light dimmed down, and I could see sort of shadows moving around in this light. And then the light sort of dimmed down a bit more, and then there standing in front of me were what I would describe as 3 non-human beings. Well, they're about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, brown, tan in colour, and had large oval heads, large oval black eyes, had long skinny arms. They looked like undeveloped children. They moved up and stood in front of me, and one of them stood directly ahead and one on either side. And they had a funny smell to them.
In 1952, something fell out of the skies which became known as the Flatwoods Monster. Most of you have probably heard about this or read about the Flatwoods Monster. This light, it looked like a comet, came out of the sky and landed on a hilltop outside of this little village of Flatwoods, which is just a tiny cluster of houses. And a group of young people, I can't call them teenagers because some of them were over 20, they decided to go up the hilltop up the top of the hill and investigate this whatever crashed on the top of the hill. So they climbed up the hill, and they were accompanied by a little dog that belonged to one of them. When they got near the top of the hill, they were struck by a terrible smell. Now, normally in these cases, the smell is described like rotten eggs, which means hydrogen sulfide. But this was not the smell of hydrogen sulfide. This smelled, the best way they could describe it, smelled like grease hitting hot metal. And it was very, very potent, whatever it was. The dog was the smarter of the group, the smarter person in the group. The dog turned around and went back down the hill. One of the young men in the group, his name was Lemon, he fainted dead away. Now, his friends they were all scared out of their, they were all wetting their pants, let's face it. They had to now carry their fainted comrade down the hill. But before they left, around the tree, a light came. And this light had two big red lights on it, like two big red eyes. And then it was like a beam of light. And this is what became the Flatwoods Monster. Now, these people were so scared and so busy that they really didn't get a chance to get a good look at it. So the newspaper accounts later filled in the details. And they gave it arms and legs and a spade-shaped head, and it became the Flatwoods Monster.
Now, in other words, evidence of poison. Yeah, leave that aside for the moment. In other words, it was a gas. They said there was a ghastly smell, and this is what was in the report. A ghastly smell of hot, molten metal. And they got the smell, although only one of them bent down and got his head in the gas. And that was this...
One of the youngsters?
No, the 18-year-old.
The 18-year-old boy.
Yes, I have to skip ahead of my story because this is what happened. They had lit this flash. They were looking at the object, and then suddenly one of the kids behind said, "Look, up in the tree." Now, there was one oak tree growing isolated right on the top of the ridge. And there's a little pathway at the bottom. This oak tree was on a bank, a 3-foot bank on the left of the pathway. The big object was a little bit further down the hill to the right, if you follow me. This is to the left. The first branch going out of the oak tree, which was a clear branch, when measured from the underneath of the branch to the path on which they were standing, was 12 foot 6 inches about. Now, this kid pointed up to this branch, and underneath the branch, apparently suspended in the air, was a creature or a thing or an object about the size of a very heavy-set man, but obviously contained in some kind of suit, or what looks from their drawings, their composite drawing, they all did sketches, and we put a composite of it. It looks exactly like one of the most modern naval diving suits, which is solid. The person who's inside it has a pair of artificial arms in front that you can crank after the incident, by which time, according to this farmer, this thing had winked out. It did not go away. It had just disappeared in situ. Therefore, they may have been perfectly honest in saying that they had not seen anything. And I think they may have been honest in saying that they went up there because they did report this perfectly ghastly and nauseating smell of molten metal. It's peculiar. Now, where was the road patrol? This is what we found out when we got there. That's that side of the story. We then started asking around all over the district, the tape recorder and such, did you see the thing? And they all said, oh, that there flying saucer, ha, ha, ha. No, but we saw the meteor. Well, then we started mapping. We had a big aerial map. We said, look at that. And there was a whole treetop knocked off and several other branches all recently shattered. And we always make a hole through the top of the tree.
Was there any odor around there?
No, because we were 5-6 days off. This was about a week after the other one had occurred.
Well, wasn't there, I think I heard that there was the local editor of the newspaper or one of the members of the police department. Oh, he went over and got down on the ground on all fours, and he noticed that there was still some stench remaining there.
As a matter of fact, first of all, the people reported it at Flatwoods. Then the posse went up, and they were so nauseated they wanted to get out of there as quick as possible, and they said it was absolutely overpowering. In the meantime, the road patrol was unable to come because they were investigating number 3, but the local police arrived from Braxton County. It's not Braxton County, I'm sorry, from the town of Sutton. They got down on their hands and knees, didn't have to. They noticed the smell, and the very charming gentleman I met down there, the owner of the Republican paper, there's two, it's a Republican and Democratic paper. The head of the Democratic paper was deeply interested in this, and he brought Mrs. May and the young fellow whose name I can't remember up to New York for a show, I think with Ed Sullivan or something here on this. And they were gone while we were down there. But this other gentleman had personally been up there that night, because he's very, very much alive to local affairs and happenings, and he was up there right smart during the night, and he smelt it too. But the next morning, there was a lot of confusion. There's always red herrings drawn across these things. A lot of people started turning up, and they said that the grass there was covered with oil. Well, it wasn't. All the grass there is covered with a kind of oil. It's coiled oil grass or tar grass. You can pass your hand over a whip of it when it's growing and pull it up, and your hand will be sticky afterwards and has a rather lovely aromatic smell. That, I am assured by all the local people, there had nothing whatsoever to do with this perfectly ghastly stench which had occurred from this plane, this thing or whatever it was that landed.
There was an odor. It was almost like a mold. Have you ever smelled a refrigerator that's been fastened up with no electric for a long time, you know? And you open that door and you get this kind of moldy smell. I smell that. And I have never been asked this question, but now is an opportunity to bring this out also. The odor itself, I smelled stronger when the beings were near me. And when they looked at me, we did not talk verbally like we're talking now. It was a telepathy type thing. And I would tell myself I'm not going to look at them, but there was no way I could resist, you know. And then at one point, they poured a liquid over my entire body, and I thought I was going to die because I could not breathe. I could not breathe, and it was so hot, you know. So then, when they pulled it off, it was like ripping a piece of tape, you know, from the body and this thing. And what that was for, other than I get so frightened, I think maybe they were making a mold, you know.
A lot of the stuff seemed to have materialized up here first, but there were things flying around us at night. And we used to smell things. In the middle of the winter, for example, we'd smell roses. It'd be 20 degrees at night, we'd smell fresh roses. And we also smell things like burning sulfur and tar. And one night I went in to reload my camera in my van, and something followed me into the van, and it had a burning sulfur smell. And I do need to point out that Linda and I were never hurt in any way by these things. We found out, we discovered early on that they don't like human fear. If someone in the area is terror-stricken with fear, nothing happens. But if they weren't in fear, then things would happen. And if there were more than 3 or 4 people in the area, nothing would happen. So they didn't like crowds, but they didn't mind the horses or the dogs. There were lots of horses, lots of dogs, and cattle in the area, and that didn't make any difference at all. I met Linda in Sedona one day, and she said, "Come on, you got to look at my truck." And her truck smelled like somebody had dumped 3 gallons of some kind of pesticide on it. It had a real chemical pesticide smell. And Sedona's been sprayed at least 4 or 5 times. I've collected some of this material. It's on the Carnicom website. That stuff that you see that's on that website is stuff that I took photographs of. And incidentally, this stuff was all over the ground like gobs of spider webs. So I went out with a stick and swirled the stick around it, and this stuff disappears. There's no residue. I want to make sure it wasn't mold or fungus or something like that. So then I stuck my finger in it, and I go, "Yeah." So when I called Carnicom up in Santa Fe, he said, "Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that." And I was sick for about 3 weeks afterwards. I had a horrendous dry cough. But other than that, I was okay, I guess.
Anyhow, they were then able to make out at least one figure was about 8 feet tall and the other one around 7 foot. They are described very similar to the other creatures, completely covered from hair from head to toe, long arms almost reaching to the ground. They're making crying sound to each other. There was a smell like burning tire, burning rubber, and they had, in these cases, glowing green eyes, which we had another case in Beaver Falls a week later of a landing and creatures being seen. One of the other fellows in our group started to get lightheaded, and he couldn't maneuver properly, and he was down on his knees. And then Dave couldn't breathe at all. You had trouble breathing. And then this terrible, strong chemical odor came out of the woods. We all smelled it. Most of us all smelled it at the time. This came out in a wave, just like the same thing all the witnesses have described with the creature. This very strong sulfuric-like smell. Almost if you took these old kitchen matches and struck them, but they didn't light. It was a very strong smell like that.
On the evening of October 25th, 1973, a young Pennsylvania farmer, Stephen Pulaski, and at least 15 other witnesses saw a bright object hovering over a field near them. Stephen grabbed his rifle and went to investigate. It was then that he noticed something walking along by the fence. They were hairy and long-armed, with greenish-yellow eyes, and a smell like burning rubber was present. Stephen sensed that these creatures were not friendly, and fired a tracer bullet over their heads. And when they kept on coming, he fired directly at one of them. The creatures then all disappeared into the woods, and the glowing object disappeared from the field instantaneously. UFO researchers as well as a state trooper were called in to investigate. When they arrived, the people there told them that Stephen had been growling like an animal and flailing his arms. His own dog ran toward him, and Stephen attacked the dog. Stephen then collapsed, and after a time began to come to his senses. The entire group commented on the nauseating, sulfur-like odor that was present.
The size, was amazing. And here they coming down. With speed, I just can't describe. Amazing speed.
Michalak says one of them stopped, suddenly accelerated, then disappeared. The other landed about 50 yards away. He watched in awe.
I hear shh, and I hear a high-pitched whistle of running equipment, pumps on high speed. When the thing landed, it was of gray-pink color. It's stainless steel, and it was pink hot. And I can feel the breeze on my face that thing is hot outside. There was my notebook, there was my pencils, so I sketched this thing.
Michalak claims it was round, about 40 feet long and about 10 feet high. His curiosity took hold, and he approached the craft. He examined the outside of it, slowly touching the glowing skin with his gloved hand. It was fiery hot, nearly melting the palm of his rubber glove. Michalak says the craft rotated, turning its grid-like exhaust vent toward him. The blast of hot gas from the vent knocked him to the ground, setting his shirt and undershirt on fire. The craft suddenly lifted off the ground, according to Michalak, and soared straight up. He threw his burning shirts to the ground, dazed and in severe pain from burns to his chest and stomach. Michalak says he wandered around for what seemed like hours before he managed to gather up his supplies. He found his way out of the woods, caught a bus, and later that night arrived back in Winnipeg. Still in pain, he rushed from the bus station to nearby Misericordia Hospital, where he was treated for first-degree burns. Michalak claimed the blast from the craft had etched a grid-like pattern into his abdomen that matched the pattern on the exhaust vent.
You can see the grid marks that this, whatever it was, left. Looks very, very painful. And and what type of health issues did he have because of this? Did he have
Well, he did. In fact, he was very, very nauseous, lost a lot of weight, couldn't hold food down. His son said that there was this odor in his bedroom because he eventually was released from the hospital and he was sent home. There was this odor that he said was like rotten eggs, sulfur that was emanating from his body itself.
Wow.
He was given blood tests. There were, there's no question that he had these marks. In fact, this grid mark thing he described as his buttons because they healed, but you could actually feel the scar tissue under his chest and stomach, right just under the skin. He had a series of fainting spells. In fact, the Mayo Clinic suggested there was some sort of a toxin that was in his system that needed to eventually work its way out. And, over the course of many years, he had relapses. His allergic reaction, his body swelled up, passed out, and so forth. He was an otherwise healthy man and had never been sick a day in his life.
They were going to arrive at 2 o'clock and it was already 2:45 and they hadn't gotten home yet. So I was really worried and I went to meet with them. I got off my street at the corner and I met with Liliana and she was very nervous, crying a lot. And then Katya and Lakia were coming. After I had calmed them, they told me, "Mama, I'm really scared because I think I saw the devil today."
Based on their testimony, the creatures were dubbed alien beasts and linked to the UFO sightings. Pacaccini claims that a high-ranking member of the military told him off the record that an alien creature was taken into custody.
They took it to Humanitas Hospital. Many different doctors, over 15 of them, were in that place. Intelligence people from the army. That creature had this horrible smell. These guys that looking like doctors with, how do you call that thing? We say stethoscope.
Stethoscope.
The heart. With stethoscopes hanging around their necks, with that white uniform, that thing here, and that mask. And the smell was just terrible, burning the noses because it was so awful.
They were all wearing masks?
Yes. And tell me, you guys, what smell we're talking about?
Ammonia.
Yeah. We know from the military police witness.
Now, how to get to the hospital?
Well, I'm going to tell, because I met this other friend who said, God sent you here. I want to introduce you to a military who wants to talk to you.
Okay.
This guy told me. And then we know that the second one was captured at January the 20th around 11 p.m. by the military police and the firemen. But at that time, they took their own cars, not official vehicles, own cars, regular clothing, went there, surrounded the area, and captured the one.
So the girls have seen this, the mother's gone back because we broke up from...
Yeah, but this is all grass here, high grass, like this. Probably
they smelled the strong smell of ammonia, but they never saw the creature again.
The mother's, the girl's mother.
Yes.
We're talking here. Yeah. Yes. Okay?
So she saw the creature and the creature ran off?
No, the girl saw the creature. The mother didn't see anything.
But she saw footprints and that's where we left it. So that creature was still at large. You're now saying that that creature was later captured around 11 p.m. on the night of the 20th of January?
Yes.
When it turned its head, they saw the large, glowing, red eyes with no pupils, and they knew that they were seeing something that to them felt like a demon or a devil. They were terrified by this sight. What on earth could possibly look like this? What could have such red glowing eyes and be alive and looking at them in such a way? They had no idea what they were seeing. And they never called it an alien. The three women did what just about anybody would do. They ran as fast as they could to get away, screaming and looking for someone that could come back and see what this thing was, but they just wanted to get away quickly. Here are the two sisters, Lillian on the right, or on the left, and Valkyria on the right, are seen with their mother, who is on the far right in the red sweater. They found their mother and took her back to that spot where they'd seen the creature. Now, the mother did not see the creature, but she certainly smelled that strong ammonia that was in the air, plus she saw two strange tracks which she could not explain. She believed her daughters. She knew they had experienced something very different. 16-year-old Lillian made a drawing, and here she presents it to the famous investigator Ubarajara Franco Rodriguez, one of the two chief investigators, along with Pacaccini, on the Varginha case. This is a close-up of that drawing by Lillian, noting the three horn-like protuberances, the large eyes with no pupils, and she does not even note a mouth, but she certainly remembers the veins which seem to stick out on the back of the neck and shoulders. Here's a drawing made by one of the other two young women. Several months later, Dr. John Mack of Harvard University, who is noted for his studies in UFO abductions, just happened to be in Brazil attending a conference and was brought down to Varginha to meet the two sisters who had seen this creature. He interviewed them for over 2 hours and was quite impressed by their sincerity, their trauma, and their credibility. I talked with him recently in person, and he and I both agree that this case in Varginha is very important, very credible, and these two young girls especially very sincere and sane. In fact, he stated he would stake his diploma on this case. It is believed that that same creature was then witnessed by other civilians and rounded up by military officials later that evening between 10 and 11 p.m. It was first taken to an emergency room, but immediately rejected and taken to the public hospital, which is shown here, the regional hospital in Varginha. It only stayed there for several hours, though. This is an artist's conception of two military personnel taking the captured creature into the regional hospital. After several hours, the creature was transferred to a private hospital, the Humanitas Hospital, on the outskirts of Varginha. On Monday, January 22nd, a convoy of trucks parked here between 3 and 6 p.m. opposite the Humanitas Hospital. A witness told that at 6 p.m. that evening, the second creature was already dead. Witnesses tell that the creature was kept in a quarantined area, heavily guarded by military personnel. Many doctors were seen coming and going, and only a few nurses were able to attend this creature, which apparently died within a day's time. This is an artist's depiction of what witnesses described. The strong smell of ammonia was apparent. The creature was dead, but now there was a new problem. Who would get the body? What would be done with it? Would the military have it? Would the doctors get it? Or would they somehow share in a joint operation